Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Gopika Jeevana Smaranam, Govinda Govinda. Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Yasya Karunya Sampraptyai Patra Bhedo Na Vidyate, Samadarshana Santushtam, Sadgurum Sharanam Bhaje. Yuvanta Pravishya Mama Vachamimam Prasuptam, Sanjeevayati Akira Shakti Dharasvadhamna, Anyamscha Hastacharana Shravanatvagadin, Pranan Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam, Bhratatishtatale Tale Vitapinam, Gramechu Bhikshamata, Swachandam Pibayamunam Jalamalam, Chirani Kantham Kurum, Sammanam Kalayati Gora Garanam, Nicha Apamanam Sudham, Shri Radha Muralidhara Bhajasada, Vrindavanam Matyaja, Kalaye Sundarakaram, Sadaika Priyadarshanam, Ajnana Nashakam Devam, Sadgurum Muralidharam, Murali Mandita Karakamalam, Munijana Mohanam, Vyatyastapadam Vanamaladharinam, Prema Bhakta Mandala Nitya Kirtitam, Shri Premika Varadam Ashrayeham. Krishnaya Vasudevaya, Devaki Nandanaya Cha, Nandagopakumaraya, Govindaya Namo Namaha. Krishnaya Vasudevaya, Haraye Paramatmane, Pranata Klesha Nashaya, Govindaya Namo Namaha. Nama Sankirtanam Yasya, Sarva Papa Pranashanam, Pranamo Dukkha Shamanaha, Tam Namami Harim Param. Shri Haraye Namaha, Shri Haraye Namaha, Shri Haraye Namaha. Gopika Jeevana Smaranam, Govinda Govinda. Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. By the benign grace of Lord Sri Hari, our beloved Madhuri Sakhi Sametha Premika Vardha Thakurji, and by the immense kripa of our Sadguru Maharaj, His Holiness Sri Sri Muralidhara Swamiji, we are enjoying the nectarine bliss of Srimad Bhagavata Mahapurana. And in the last session, we stopped at a point where Sri Narada Maharishi, during the conversation with Veda Vyasa Maharishi, was about to talk about his own life. He wanted to inspire Veda Vyasa Maharishi to compose a scripture in such a way that would in turn inspire devotion in the hearts of people who listen to it, who read it, or who just know about it. So that was the intention of Sage Narada, and Narada Maharishi told Veda Vyasa Ji that though you have written so many scriptures, a scripture which does not talk about the glory of Bhagavan Vasudeva is but incomplete, is but in reality worthless. So any grantha, any text that we compose, irrespective of how great it is grammatically or poetically or in every other literary aspect, irrespective of all that, it should contain the divine names and the leelas, the sports, the divine sports, and the glory of Bhagavan. Only then Mahatmas would respect it. only then that text will be accepted by the great souls and they would enjoy it. A common text which contains literary beauty but is completely devoid of anything to do with the Lord or His divine names will be completely shunned by such great Paramahamsas. It might be enjoyed by common people, but Mahatmas will not even touch it. And having said that, Narada said that though you have spoken about Bhagavan here and there, you have not spoken about the glory of the Lord as you should have. So please contemplate in the state of Samadhi. Think of the Lord and Bhagavan would reveal all His divine glories, His divine leelas to you. And with that revelation, you can compose this great Bhagavata Mahapurana. You can compose a text which would emphasize on the glory of Bhagavan. And the idea should be to inspire devotion. And how do you inspire devotion in the heart of people? What inspires devotion? What infuses love for Bhagavan? Narada said that I'll tell you how I became a devotee. See, whenever we talk about a concept, sometimes it's so tough to grasp, is it not? An easier way of doing it would always be to give an example. If we tell people that, you do this, it's good for you. You know what? I had a neighbor and he had this problem and he tried this and it worked out. So when we give an example, a practical thing that it really happened, it really works, when we say something like that, only then do the listeners actually catch on to the idea. Is it not? Otherwise it is so abstract that we really don't understand what we have to do. So Narada Maharishi is no different. He also says that you have to compose a scripture to inspire devotion, and I'll tell you how I was inspired. I'll tell you what happened in my life. Not in this life, but he talks about his previous life. And he starts by narrating his own story. As we said in the last session, this is the very first Bhakta Charitra in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Narada says, Aham puratita bhave bhavam mune dasyastu kasyaschana vedavadinam nirupito balaka eva yoginam shushrushane pravrishi nirvivikshatam aham puratita bhave bhavam mune dasyastu. Narada begins his story. He says, in the previous kalpa, a kalpa is 1 day of Lord Brahma. And 1 day of Lord Brahma is equivalent to 1,000 Chatur Yugas. A Chatur Yuga is one full cycle of 4 Yugas. Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. These are the 4 Yugas. So one complete cycle of these 4 Yugas. One Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. One full set. It's called one Chatur Yuga. 1,000 such Chatur Yugas. We won't get into the detail of what a Chatur Yuga is, what each Yuga is. It's like lakhs and crores of years. Dwapara Yuga is like 2 times that of Kali Yuga. And Krita Yuga is like 3 times the Kali Yuga span. And Satya Yuga is like 4 times Kali Yuga span. That's how it is. And Brahma's 1 day time, not the night, 1 day time has 1,000 such Chatur Yugas, which is further divided as 14 Manvantaras. So each Manvantara has around 72 Chatur Yugas approximately, some 71 something. So round it becomes 72 Chatur Yugas. And that is just 1 day time of Brahma. That is called one Kalpa. 14 Manvantaras, which is 1,000 Chatur Yugas, is 1 day time of Brahmaji, which is called one Kalpa. So 2 Kalpas make 1 full day, 1 day and a night of Brahmaji. So at the end of 1 Kalpa, Brahmaji would sleep for another Kalpa. He would wake up again and the Srishti would start again. That's how our scriptures claim. And by Bhagavan's grace, we should be able to get into the details of these 2 when we come to the 2nd canto and the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam, where there is a complete description of all this creation of this universe. So here, he talks about the previous kalpa. So right now, we are in the daytime of Brahma, and in the previous daytime of Brahma, it is a completely different incarnation of Narada. It is a different birth altogether. And he says that I was born as a little boy, as a little child of my mother, who was actually a servant maid, who was someone who was serving the Brahmanas, those of them who were experts and exponents of Vedas. Such was my mother, and I was a humble child of that mother. And we were just there together in a village. And once it so happened that to our village, we were so fortunate, many sadhus came. Those were the days when sadhus used to just travel, and those were the days in India, the holy land of Bharat, where everyone was always welcome. The people who were grihasthas, the family people, they always used to cook extra food. And every night they would see to it that the vessel is not empty. They'd always have a bit of food left over. And after 9 o'clock, just before they're ready to retire to their bed, they would open the door and look out. And there used to be verandas in all the houses. And they would just look out and see if there is any traveler sitting there. And if they find one, they'll gladly invite them to have their dinner there. They would offer food, they would offer all the hospitality that they can. And that is how great our land was. It is a fearless time when there was no threat and people trusted each other so much. And in those days, villages always had a little place where sadhus can always come and stay. And if sadhus come and stay there, and if the people of the village see a sadhu one day and they find that he's going to be there for another night or two, they would all gather the resources to serve him gladly. That was how it was. It used to be called as Bhajana Madam, the place that was allocated for the sadhus to stay was called Bhajan Mat. And any sadhu can just come and stay there. There'll always be a river or a pond, some kind of water source which they can use, and they'll be taking bhiksha, they'll be seeking alms, and the people of the village will be more than glad to actually give them all that they can. They would treat them, they would serve them with so much of respect. That was how it was. And when Naradaji, in his previous birth, we should remember the story of the previous birth. So whenever I refer to Naradaji, it's not the Naradaji, it is the little boy who was to be Naradaji in the next incarnation, in the next birth. So that little boy who was living in that village with his mother, it so happened that once sadhus came to the village, and it was the beginning of the rainy season. And the 4 months of rainy season is always called Chaturmasya. And these 4 months are really, really auspicious for all of them who tread the path of spiritual life. So it is more so for sadhus and sannyasis, and they generally take a vow called Chaturmasya Vrata during these 4 months. And the main vrata is that during those 4 months, these sadhus who are generally travelers and who are paribrajakas and who always keep traveling, because usually for a sannyasi, the rules are really strict. They are not supposed to stay in the same place for a long period. As a matter of fact, the rule goes that they cannot stay in a place for more than 3 days or 3 nights. And even while staying in a place for 3 days and 3 nights, they are not supposed to stay in the same place. Even if they choose shelter under a tree, they are not supposed to sit under the same tree every day. Because that is how dispassionate they are supposed to be. And the fact is that mind can be so fickle. It can be so frivolous. And it has a nature to get attached very easily. In a very lighter vein, Swamiji would always say that even when people come to sit for katha, if there is a 7-day satsang happening, and people come for the first day, they find a good spot, Next day they come, someone else is sitting there, they get annoyed. They say, that's my place. Really? In a temple, they catch hold of a pillar and say, that's my place. Because it's good to lean out there. Is it not? So we get attached. That mamakara, that this is mine, comes up so easily. And it's dangerous for a sannyasi to have such mamakara, is it not? So, a rule for a sannyasi goes that they are not supposed to stay in a place for long. And the other reason behind it is they live on alms. They have to take diksha. If they stay for more than 3 days in a place, they would, by the end of 3 days, they would know the houses where they would get good food. They would know the houses where they might not get really tasty food. And inadvertently, without even their conscious effort, very unconsciously, they may start choosing to take bhiksha in the place where they feel the food is good. Again, it's dangerous. Tongue is the most dangerous thing. That's why Bhagavatam says, Jitam sarvam jite rase. Those of them who have won over the tongue have actually won over everything. We don't have to control our senses individually. If we can control our tongue alone, the rest of them will be automatically controlled. And the beauty is, controlling tongue is so important, mainly because it's quite interesting, the way the Lord has actually created these indriyas. We have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 2 hands, 2 legs, and all that. But with these 2 eyes, we do only one job of seeing, is it not? The 2 ears, we just listen. The 2 nose, we just breathe. We just smell, which is as good as breathing. We smell because we breathe, is it not? So everything is 2, but the job is 1. But very interestingly, we have only 1 tongue, but it has 2 jobs. It tastes, it also speaks. And when we say controlling tongue, we mean both. When we control the food, all the indriyas are controlled. When we control the tongue, we have really won over everything. Jitam sarvam jite rase. They two are so related, and it's so important to control the speech and the food. And that's why for sannyasis, if they start staying in a place for a long time, they'll get the taste of the taste. And they won't be able to leave it easily. So, scriptures say that they're not supposed to stay long in a single place. They have to just keep moving. That being the case, in Chaturmasya Vrata, the main thing is, these sannyasis are sadhus. Generally sadhus, who need not be sannyasis, who can also be granthas, but who are sadhus or brahmacharis. They don't have to be in a particular ashrama. During the Chaturmasya, they don't have to travel. As a matter of fact, it is a vrata where they decide to stay in the same place for the 4 months. The reason behind this being, it's a rainy season. And for sadhus, the primary principle is ahimsa. They're not supposed to hurt even a little insect. And during rainy seasons, all the insects will be coming out, and if they keep walking on it, they might end up trampling too many creatures, and that's not ahimsa. So to avoid doing himsa to all the creatures, they decide to stay in a place. The second reason is, as we said, since they keep traveling and they just have to keep shifting places for every 3 days, they don't actually get time to sit and practice their sadhana. They have to be on the move always. Is it not? So these 4 months, they take this vrata of Chaturmasya Vrata, and they decide to stay in a single place so that they can pursue their sadhana. Be it japa or dhyana or atma vichara or kirtana, they sit in a single place and they start doing it. So that's how it happened that a few sadhus had decided to follow the Chaturmasya Vrata in that particular village where this little boy was living with his mother. And the people of the village, when they found that the sadhus had graced their village and found themselves to be fortunate enough to get an opportunity to be able to serve them for the next 4 months, they wanted to really do it the best way they could. And since the sadhus were staying in the bhajan mat, they were looking for someone who could serve the sadhus by cleaning the place, by keeping the ashram clean and by bringing fruits and flowers for their puja and doing all the menial jobs. just to support the sadhus and serve them like that. And the villagers wanted someone who would really respect and who would understand the great fortune that's being bestowed on that person for being allowed to be serving the sadhus. Is it not? So they were waiting for someone like that. And when this little boy's mother, this Naradaji's mother, when she heard that they were looking for someone like that, she volunteered. She went to them and she said, "Sir, would you please give that great honor to me? Will I be fortunate enough? Do you think that I am capable? Do you think I am worthy of it? If you do, please give me the opportunity to serve these sadhus." And the people of the village, the main heads of the village, who were actually having a meeting on it, when they saw this lady ask with so much humility and so much love and respect, they were so touched. And they said, of course, and they all knew her. She had been serving them for long, and they knew how well behaved she was. They knew how loving she was. They knew how good she was at her job. So they readily gave it. They said, "Sure, mother, please do it. The sadhus are here. So please clean the place and serve them in every possible way." The mother was thrilled. She couldn't believe her ears. She felt so blessed. And the very next morning, she woke up so very early, around 3 o'clock, and she was all set because she knew that the sadhus would be up early and they would all walk towards the river out there and they would be doing their morning ablutions and all that. And by the time they are back, she'll have to work out everything and she has to clean the ashram, get the fruits and all. So she was up, and Naradaji says, "I was a mere child at that time, 3-4 years old, just maybe 5 years old, not more than that. And my mother and me had no one else. We had no other relative. So when my mother had to go for work early in the morning, she could not leave me behind. So she would just carry me along. And she took me to the ashram. She would make me sit in a corner. And she would sweep the ashram, she would clean it, she would bring the flowers. And all the while, Naradaji says that I would sit there and just doze off. Little child that he was. How can a little child sit and do all that at 3 o'clock in the morning? A 4 or 5 year old child that Naradaji was, he would just doze off. And poor mother, she would look at that child, and the beauty is, she says, "Emaya peta kila chapaler bhake, dante adrita kridanake nuvartini, chakru kripam yadyapi tulya darshanaha, shushushamane munayo alpabhashini." This mother, nirupito balaka eva yogina. Naradaji says very clearly, when I was sleeping like that, my mother would not, let me do that. He was blessed with a wonderful mother. She must have been a very great soul. Because when she was working, the sadhus would just get up and they would be going towards the river. And this child would be sleeping off. And one day the mother very lovingly just shook that little child up. And she would say, don't doze off like that. They're all Mahatmas. It's a rare opportunity. One cannot get a darshan of such great souls easily. Don't waste the time. Imagine a mother talking something like this to a 4 or 5 year old child. But this child, unlike so many other children, this child was very obedient. And he always listened to whatever his mother said. And next day, when the sadhus were out for having a bath in the river, the child tried its best not to sleep, not to doze off, and with his eyes wide open, he was staring at them. The mother was happy. She slowly went to the child and she said, "You know what? When sadhus come like that, just don't sit still and stare at them. They're Mahatmas. You have to show some respect, is it not? Just do an Anjali. Do a Namaskar." And the child, the next day, when the sadhus went, slowly just, folded its hands like that. It brought its palms together and did an Anjali. And the sadhus looked at the little child, were very pleased. They just gave a light smile and they walked along. And then when the mother saw that the child was listening, and he could comprehend it and he was executing it, she was very happy. Next day she said, you know what? This is not enough. Just go one step further. When the sadhus come, get up and do a namaskar. Next day the child was, now happy to show that he has learnt a new trick. And when the sadhus came out, he immediately got up and did a namaskar. He prostrated in front of the sadhus and they were impressed. They thought, wow, this child is really cute, isn't he? And they just walked on. Now the sadhus kataksha, their loving glance was falling on this child, and the child was bestowed with such a blessed mother. She was inspiring him, and slowly the mother said, looks like the glance of the sadhus was working on the child, which made the mother actually instigate the child to do more. And she said, you know what? Don't stop with just doing a prostration. Follow them. But be careful. Don't go too close. Stay a bit away and don't disturb them. Don't hinder their sadhana in any way. Just stay a bit away and just go follow them. Being in their presence is such a great blessing. The next day, the child waited for the sadhus to come. He did a prostration, he did namaskar. When they started walking away, he waited for a moment, and when there was a distance of 10 paces between them, he just followed them. He went there. The mother was so happy. She could not do any of that. She was actually making the child do everything for her, whatever she wanted. And she sent him like that. Next day she said, don't stop here. There's one more thing you can do. While you follow them, she knows that when the child follows, it will be filled with satsanga, because every moment the sadhus talk about only Bhagavan. If we just make ourselves available, because sadhus are always available. We are the ones who are always busy. And we don't really give time for satsang. If we just can make ourselves available and just be around them, that would suffice. Because they would fill our ears and eyes and heart completely with Bhagavan. Because when they open their mouth, they can talk of nothing else but Bhagavan. Is it not? And that was what the child was already listening. And now the mother said, when they have their bath in the river, see how the river flows. And have your bath in such a place where the water which has touched, which has had a contact with the body of the sadhus flows through. Bathe in such water, you'll be blessed. The child did everything. And when the sadhus, they saw such a different child. Narada talks about himself. He says, Te maya peta kila chapalerbhake dante adrita kridanukenu vartini. Then, whenever you talk about a 4 or 5-year-old child, we always think of children being really mischievous and frivolous and, playing around and jumping around, and that's how we think. But here was a child. He says, I was a child who was completely without any kind of frivolous activity. I was not even playing with any playthings. Nothing at all. So I was just following them and being around them. That literally brought their grace upon me. They were so happy. Chakru kripa yadyapi tulya darshanam. Though they see no difference. In the eyes of a sadhu, everybody is equal. In spite of it, since I was just going around them, they somehow started showering a very unique kind of love and compassion towards me. I could feel it. And while I was spending my time with the sadhus, just going around them and just staying with them, not knowing what they were doing, not understanding even one bit of their sadhana or the purpose of life or anything like that, I was just there with them. Just making myself available. Just being around. That's it. And one day, it so happened that my mother, Narada is narrating, is it not? It so happened that my mother, who had gone out for some work, was very late. So every day, the mother, after serving the sadhus, would go around doing the work that she always does in the other houses in the village. And the child would still be in the sadhu mat, in the bhajan mat with the sadhus. And she would go collect the food that's been offered to her, in various houses, the leftovers. She would bring that and she would feed the child and then she would eat if there was anything left. That's how loving she was. And one day it so happened that the mother, she left and it was 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon and she was still not back. She was caught up with some kind of work and this child did not know what was happening. And slowly, the child started feeling really, really hungry. It really wanted to eat something and it didn't know where to go. It didn't know whom to ask. And it was just watching the sadhus. The sadhus had got their bhiksha and they had their food. The sadhus, when they take bhiksha, even for asking alms, there are rules. Again, for a sannyasi, it is said that they should not seek alms in more than 7 houses. In the sense that they can stop in front of only 7 houses to seek alms. Of the 7 houses, if they get food in 3 houses, then they should not go to the next house at all. And if they don't get any food in all the 7 houses, then they're not supposed to beg in the 8th house. They're supposed to feel that this is Bhagavan's will. Accept it as Bhagavan's will and go without food for that day. That's how they should be. And even after getting the bhiksha, they should not be eating to their fill. Instead, they should actually take only 3 handfuls from whatever is available. And after eating 3 handfuls, they should rinse their mouth completely so that there is no taste left in the tongue or the cheek. And they should just gargle completely. And whatever is left out, they should not save it for another day. They should just throw it off. The child was watching the sadhus eat and so much was left out. And slowly, this child went to them and he sought their permission. Uchhishtalepānanumodito dvijaihi sakritsma bunje tadapasta kilbishaha evam pravrittasya vishuddha chetasaha tadharma eva atmaruchi prajayate uchhishtalepān anumodito dvijaihi. He went to them, he sought their permission and he asked, can I eat the leftovers? And the sadhus gladly agreed. They said, oh my child, it's all yours, eat. And he says, Sakritsma bunje, I just took whatever was left over in their plate and I put it in my mouth. And the moment I swallowed it, something transpired. I don't know what happened. But from that moment, evam pravrittasya vishuddha chetasaha tadharma eva atmaruchi prajayate. Suddenly, something changed in me. And next day when I was going behind them, when they were talking about something called Bhagavan, I could relate to it. I wanted to listen more about that Krishna Katha that they were talking. When they did Kirtan, somehow I was so touched. My whole body was thrilled and I could feel it. And I wanted to listen to Bhagavad Katha. I wanted to do Namadwaar Sankirtana. I wanted to just be around them and think and immerse myself in that divine bliss. Tad dharma eva atmaruchi prajayate. I was completely ignorant of any of these. Started having an interest in the dharma, in the Bhagavata Dharma that the sadhus were following. How? Uchhishtalepān anumodito dvijaihi. The uchhishta of a Mahatma can do such miracles. It can change us completely. The presence of a Mahatma, anything that's associated with him, anything that comes in contact with a Mahatma can easily change our life. That's the beauty of it. And Narada ji says that here clearly, I would not have been like this at all, but I imbibed all that because of that Uchhishta Prasada. And from that day onwards, I really started loving Bhagavata Dharma. When I heard them speak Bhagavad Gita, I wanted to hear more of it. I wanted to do more Kirtana. I started enjoying it. Till then, they had been talking and I had been listening, but I could not make that connection. But after this happened, tad dharma eva atmaruchi prajayate. That gave me love for the path of devotion that these sadhus were treading. So that shows that Narada ji actually had contact with sadhus who were Bhagavatas. The sadhus who had stayed in that village were people who had followed Bhagavata Dharma. And he said, the more I was with them, the more I heard all the katha, very easily, very clearly, I understood that I was not this body. I understood that I was something completely beyond all this. I knew what real self meant. All because of satsanga. That's it. Nothing else. Such knowledge dawned on me. And having said so much, that uchhishta, that company of the sadhus, that's what gave me that ruchi in Bhagavata Dharma. And having said that, I'll tell you, initially Naradji said, is it not, to Veda Vyasji? He recollects it. He says, Veda Vyasji, I told you, is it not, anything that is devoid of devotion is completely useless. Vairagya, dispassion, is not easy. Not all can tread that path. Karma, with motive, yes. Without motive, not easy. But even that, devoid of devotion, is useless. Is it not? And I'll tell you, karma is always something that is binding. Karma always binds us. It creates attachment. That's how it is. But I'll tell you how to do karma yoga. People talk of karma yoga. Is it not? They say, do your duty. Don't expect the result. But how do we do that? How do I not expect result? How do I tell my mind that I just have to do the duty? It's easier said than done. Is it not? So Naradji here says, I'll tell you a practical way of doing it. A practical way for karma yoga. How do you do it? Offer it to Bhagavan. But that's what karma yoga always says. It says offer the fruit to Bhagavan. You do the duty. How do I offer it? He says, I'll tell you the secret of karma yoga. Any karma is binding. He gives a beautiful example. He says, something that causes a particular ailment cannot be the treatment for the ailment. Is it not? If there's a bacteria or a virus that's actually causing a fever, that cannot be the solution for the fever. But, he says, if that particular causing agent is treated properly, sometimes that can actually become the remedy for the malady. Is it not? How? Naradji is talking about inoculation here. It's the grandeur of Bhagavatam. Is it not? That's what inoculation does. Take a bit of that which causes the disease, treat it, inject it in, it becomes a cure. Is it not? Naradji says, similarly, karma, when we do with attachment, is binding. But that same karma, when we offer it to Bhagavan, will actually lead us, it is actually, we will actually release us from the bonds. It's capable of releasing us from the samsara. How do you offer it? He says, Kurvana yatra karmani Bhagavan shikshaya sakrit grinanti gunanamani Krishnasya anusmaranti cha. Very simple. Whatever work we do, very simply chant Bhagavan Nama along with it. Any karma that we do with the thought of the Lord, by chanting the divine names of the Lord, is automatically offered to Bhagavan. That is how you do karma yoga. And if we do that, that's it. That is offered, and that karma that we offer to Bhagavan by chanting Bhagavan Nama will cleanse us and will actually release us from the bond. So, Naradji made karma yoga completely practical. So he said so much. That's what he said. And he just rested, he just stopped talking. That's how the 5th chapter of Bhagavata Mahapurana, the Prathama Skanda, completes. That's how it concludes. And in the 6th chapter, Vyasa Maharishi begins. He is like completely lost. It was as if Naradji started something really interesting and he stopped it abruptly. Vyasa Maharishi was not going to be cheated like that. So immediately he did not let Naradji go. He asked him, Bhikshubhir vipravasite vijnana deshtrubhistava vartamano vayasyadye tataf kimakarod bhavan. Naradji, what happened after that? After Chaturmasya, all the sadhus would have gone. What did you do after that? how did you spend the rest of your life? Because this is the Janma that you are Narada. In that Janma still you had more lifespan, is it not? So what did you do with the rest of your life? What happened? And I'm really curious to know this. How come you remember all this? This happened in your previous birth, in previous kalpa. How do you remember all this? Please tell me everything in detail. Naradaji was very happy. As we keep repeating, in Bhagavatam we find this very often. The narrator will always try to see the depth of the listener. He'll say how far they really want to know. How far they're really listening. How far are they really interested in knowing this? And they would, get a feeler now and then. And that's what Naradaji did here too. He was very happy that Veda Vyasa wanted to know the rest of the story. So he continues. He says, after the sadhus left, Chaturmasya was over, and just before they left, they actually introduced me to the great knowledge of the scriptures. Mainly, they introduced me to that knowledge which was directly spoken by Bhagavan himself, which is called Bhagavata Dharma. And after having instructed me on that Bhagavata Dharma, the sadhus, they left. They can't stay in that place. And after they left, I was left with my mother again. Ekatmaja me janani yoshin muda cha kinkari mayatmaje ananya gatau chakre snehanubandhanam. My mother was so attached to me. I was her only child. And I don't remember my father at all. I don't think I had one. He must have passed away early. I was left alone with my mother, and she had such great love for me. Her life was centered completely around me. And because her life was centered around me, I could not leave her too. So I stayed with her, hoping against hope that someday this attachment would be over and we would start walking the path of spiritual life. And she was so very attached that she did everything for me. She always felt that I was helpless, and she herself was dependent on others, and she felt that I was dependent on her. So it was her responsibility to take care of me, and that's what she was doing. And one day, while we were leading a life like this, it so happened that one late night, my mother was called upon duty to milk a cow. And on the way, as fate would have it, she stamped on a snake, and the angry snake bit her, and that very moment, she just died. And Naradaji says that I did feel very bad. She was the only person whom I knew in this entire world. Apart from those sadhus who had also left. She was my only support. And she also passed away. I did feel sad. I did cry. But Naradaji says, but I realized, tada tadaham ishasya bhaktanam shamabhipsataha anugraham manyamanaha pratishtam disham uttaram. At that moment, I felt that this is also Bhagavan's boon, his grace. It is his anugraha. How? Tada tadaham ishasya bhaktanam shamabhipsataha. It's a beautiful term that Naradaji tells here. He says, at that time I felt that Bhagavan will always do only good for his devotees. He's always concerned about the welfare of his devotees. So whatever happens in the life of a devotee is certainly 100% for their own good. It cannot be otherwise. He was very convinced. So he thought maybe this was the only attachment I had. My mother was the only attachment I had. And now that even that is gone, I'm completely free to think of Bhagavan. Maybe Bhagavan wanted to make it easier for me. He accepted it as Bhagavan's grace. That is real devotion, is it not? Imagine a child who has nobody else, had only one mother, and the moment he got satsang, he started chanting the divine names of Lord, he lost that mother. The first thought that common man would have is, oh my God, I came to satsanga, I did so much of nama, and this happened in my life. Why should it happen to me? Now I am an orphan, completely left alone in this world. Why did Bhagavan be so merciless? That's how a common man would think. But here was the child which thought, Bhaktanam Shamabhipsataha. Oh, my Lord, He is the most loving. And whatever he does is certainly for my welfare. He took it like that and he started off from the village. He started walking towards northern direction. And he says that he kept walking. He crossed through many forests and gardens and groves and rivers and ponds. He passed through so many beautiful sceneries and so many dry lands. And after a very long walk, he walked for many days and many nights. Finally, he was really tired. He looked around. There was a little pond, a lake there. And he refreshed himself in that lake. And he found a peepal tree. He sat under it. And before he knew what he was doing, his eyes were closed. And he started thinking about those sadhus who had been there in that village. And the moment the thought came, he thought of all the katha, Krishna katha, that the sadhus had told him. And immediately he started thinking of that divine Lord. And very unconsciously, very effortlessly, that little beautiful form of Bhagavan started manifesting itself in his heart. Dhyayatas charanam bhojam bhava nirjita chetasa autkantya shukalakshasya hridyasin me shanai harihi premati vara nirbhinna pulakangoti nirvrataha ananda samplavelino na pashyam ubhayam mune. When he closed his eyes, slowly the Lord, that beautiful form of Krishna was manifesting on its own in his heart. Shanaihi, he says very slowly. First the child saw the beautiful lotus feet of the Lord, then his beautiful knees and thighs and hip, and slowly his navel with lotus there, and then the broad shoulders and chest of Bhagavan, and the strong arms of the Lord, and the beautiful lotus countenance of Bhagavan, and his lotus eyes and lotus lips, and Champaka Nashika, that beautiful nose of Bhagavan, and the broad forehead and the curly hair locks, and up there, the beautiful peacock feather. And when he was enjoying this beauty of Bhagavan, his whole body was thrilled. The hairs were standing on their end, and tears of love were gushing forth, and he was completely drenched in that bliss. And he says, Na pashyam ubhayam mune. He was completely unconscious of his self or of that form. He completely merged with that Lord. He was in such divine bliss. In a moment, it vanished. When he was in that rapture of joy, suddenly it was gone. And when he saw that form was missing, he immediately was so perturbed. He opened his eyes, he looked around, again he sat down, again he closed his eyes, he controlled his breath, he searched for that form in his heart, but in vain. That form was lost. And he was so pained, he didn't know what to do. And when he was so pained, Bhagavan was so compassionate. Gambhira shlakshnaya vacha shuchaha prashamayanniva hantasmin janmani bhavan mama drashtumiharhati avipakva kashayana durdarshoham kuyoginam satsevaya adhirgaya api jatamayi dridamatihi. Gambhira shlakshnaya vacha shuchaha prashamayanniva. Narada says, as if to soothe the grief that I was feeling, in a voice of thunder, that Bhagavan, who is beyond words, spoke to me with words. That is his compassion, is it not? He didn't have to step down like that. He is not answerable to anybody. He doesn't have to give reason. But Bhagavan did that. That showed his love. And in that he says, Hantasmin. Hanta. Hanta means alas. That is so full of compassion and pity for the child. He says, oh my child, in this janma, in this birth, you are still not ready to have a vision of me. Narada says, I smiled. Because I did have this vision. How did I have that? Bhagavan says, Avipakka kashayanam durdarshoham kuyoginam. You are not yet ripe enough to have my vision. I'm sure you're wondering how you had it now. Is it not? That's because Satsevaya Dirgaya, you found a shortcut. I don't give darshan to anybody easily. People are struggling for ages and births together. crores of births, they have been performing penance and tapas and austerities and whatnot. They have not had a glimpse of even my foot nail. That's how rare my darshan is. But Swamiji, in a very light way, he would always say, Bhagavan said that in my entire life of, in my experience, I have never done something like this or never seen something like this where a little child, a 5-year-old, got darshan of Bhagavan so easily. You know why? Satsevaya adhirgaya. You had served the sadhus and you had gained their grace, their compassion. That's what actually earned you this darshan. But if it has to last, it will take time. You are not ready yet. You are not ripe yet. Don't worry. In the next birth, you will be born as the mind-born son of Brahmaji, and in that janma, you should have my darshan. And by my grace, you'll remember me, you'll remember all this too. Don't worry. And that answers Veda Vyasa Maharshi's question. How do you remember something that happened in your previous janma? Because Bhagavan so blessed him. Otherwise, it's not possible, is it not? In the previous kalpa, it's a completely different creation again. The entire universe is created again in the next kalpa. In spite of that, Naraji remembers that's Bhagavan's grace. He said, because you served the sadhus, you got darshan. That's a shortcut for attaining Bhagavad Darshana. If we serve the sadhus, Bhagavan is immensely pleased and he would just shower his blessing. But still you are not ready. And in next janma, you'll get it. And then Naraji says, and after that, I did not torture myself. I didn't sit in a corner, I didn't try to do dhyana or yoga or atma vichara or anything. You know what I did? Namani anantasya hatatra pappatan guhyani bhadrani kritani chasmaran gam paryatan tushtamanagata sprihaha kalam pratikshan vimado vimatsaraha. Bhagavan had told me that in next janma I want to be his devotee anyway. I'll have the darshan. So very happily, I didn't do anything. I just spent my time roaming around, chanting his divine names, thinking of his divine leelas, the secret pastimes of Bhagavan. Those were the ones that were all constantly on my mind. And I just was not bothered about what people thought of me. I was singing his glories and waiting for that moment called death. That's it. It was such a simple thing for me. And that is Saudaminiyata. Just like a flash of lightning, the death came. And I didn't know how I lost this body. I was not even conscious of the pain of losing this body because I was immersed in the bliss of chanting his divine names. And during the end of that kalpa, end of that day, I merged with Brahmaji, who in turn merged with Bhagavan. And in the next kalpa again, when Brahmaji woke up, I was born as this Narada. And Veda Vyasa ji is very, very thrilled. He says, that's beautiful, Naraji. I just have one doubt. Do you have Bhagavan's darshan in this janma? Can you tell me about that? Naraji smiled and said, you know what? As soon as I was born, I went to Bhagavan and I told him I'm here. And Bhagavan gave me a beautiful veena. Devadattam imam veenam swara brahma vibhushitam murchayitva harikatham gayamanascharamyaham. Devadattam imam veenam swara brahma vibhushitam murchayitva harikatham gayamanascharamyaham. He gave me this veena. The moment I got that veena from him, I said Narayana, Narayana, and I just walked out of Vaikuntha, and I have been roaming around, doing the same, chanting his divine glories, chanting his divine names, singing his pastimes. That's what I do. Okay, do we get Bhagavad Darshana? No, Vedavyasa ji is very curious. Naraji says, don't ask me. Pragayata svaviryani tirthapada priyashravaha ahuta iva me shigram darshanam yati chetasi. When I keep singing his divine names like that, I always find someone behind me. I look around, I see Krishna is there. I ask him, Krishna, why are you here? I didn't call you. No, he says, ahuta iva me. He says, as if I called him. He's right behind me always. And I ask him, why are you here? He says, if you keep chanting my names like this, I can't help but follow you. I can't help but give you darshan. I just have to be around you. I love when people sing my divine names. I love when people sing my glory, And he says, that is what I'm doing. I keep chanting his names, and now I am not bothered about whether I have pakwa or no pakwa, because Bhagavan is in love with me, because I am in love with his nama. Simple as that. And all I do now is only that. Nin pugal paaduvadandri veroru velai ariyen vedamurte vedamurte. Nin pugal paaduvadandri. Swamiji, in his kirtan, he very beautifully says, my only job is to sing your glories. Nothing else. Kaladesam kadanda unai paaduvadharku kaalo desham endra niyamangal undo nin pugal paaduvadandri. There is no rule of where we should chant or how we should chant. Just as Bhagavan is beyond space, time and all those equations, his divine names are also like that. We can chant anywhere, anytime. Anybody can do it. That's the beauty of it. And that bhajananandam, mokshanandame. Swamiji says that bhajanananda, the joy of singing the glories of Lord, is liberation. That's moksha. Chanting the divine names of the Lord is moksha. Such a person is Jivan Mukta, says Swamiji. And Narada says, that's what I did, and that's what I'm doing. So that is my story for you, Veda Vyasji. I have answered everything. I have told you what is the cause for your feeling so restless. That's because you have not spoken about the glories of Bhagavan as you should have. And the solution is, create a text, compose a text which inspires devotion in people. How? By completely inundating the scripture with the glories of Bhagavan. Create a text which talks about nothing but Bhagavan. When people read it, listen to it, they should be inspired with bhakti. It should talk about devotees. It should talk about divine names. It should talk about Bhagavan's leelas. Just as I was in the company of sadhus, I heard, about Bhagavan's leelas. I heard them sing. I was in their company. Because of their blessings, I got initiated into the path of Bhagavata Dharma, and that's how I became Narada. That's how I have this devotion for Bhagavan to an extent where I have written a text called Narada Bhakti Sutra. Is it not? So that is the secret of my life. That is the secret of devotion all along. So I hope I've answered all the questions that you had. And now it's time that you sit in Samadhi and think of Bhagavan and compose this text. Having said that, Naradji did a namaskar and he took leave of Veda Vyasji and playing on his veena happily, Narayana, 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 Narayana. He just went on. And Veda Vyasji was so pleased. He felt so blessed, so fortunate. He looked at Naradji and he said, Aho devarshi dhanyoyam yat kirtim shargadan manaha gayan madyan idam tantriya ramayati aturam jagat. How blessed Naradji you are. You are so happy because you're singing Bhagavan's names, the divine names of the Lord, and you spread that happiness everywhere by chanting his glories. Such a blessed life that you have. And now Veda Vyasji was ready to sit and meditate and contemplate on the divine leelas of Bhagavan so that he can be inspired to compose this great Bhagavata Mahapurana. So with that, the 6th chapter of the Prathama Skanda, the first canto of Srimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, comes to a conclusion, and for the next session we'll start with the 7th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. And by Bhagavan's immense grace, we have enjoyed Bhagavatam so far, and with a prayer to the lotus feet of our Guru Maharaj and Lord Krishna, that he bring us to satsang every time, and without any obstacle we are able to enjoy this Bhagavata Purana. Kayena vacha manasendriyedva buddhyatmana va prakrite svabhavat karomi yatyat sakalam parasmai narayana eti samarpayami. Gopika jeevana smaranam govinda govinda. Sadgurunath Maharaj ki jai. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे। सद्गुरु महाराज की जय।